All right, welcome back. Jonathan Clark in the studio. We are talking about Electric Ladyland 50th Anniversary Deluxe Box Set. Look at this thing. It's coming out November 9th, and I'm going to introduce our very special guest in a second here. But let me just tell you what this is all about. 3 CD, 1 Blu-ray set, or a 6 LP, 1 Blu-ray set. Includes the original double album, now newly remastered. Also included Electric Ladyland, the early takes, demos, studio outtakes, plus a new 5.1 surround sound mix of the entire original album by Hendrix's original engineer, Eddie Kramer, who's with us in the studio. The original stereo mixes in uncompressed 24-bit, 96 kilohertz, high-resolution audio. There's so much here. Jimi Hendrix Experience live at the Hollywood Bowl from 1968. The feature-length documentary, At Last, beginning the making of Electric Ladyland, and a full-color 48-page book containing Jimi's handwritten lyrics, poem, and instructions to his record label, as well as never-before-published photos from the recording sessions that were shot by Eddie Kramer himself. And Eddie, welcome. And we also have John McDermott here, who is the award-winning producer-director of Jimi Hendrix Electric Church on Showtime. Also Hear My Train A-Comin' on PBS. Many more. Also serves as head of catalog development at Experience Hendrix and written 4 books on Jimi. Eddie Kramer, of course, award-winning producer and engineer who worked with Jimi on pretty much everything he did, as well as work with the Beatles, the Stones, Led Zeppelin, Kiss, and so many more. And a photographer extraordinaire as well. So welcome, guys. Sorry for the long intro, but I feel it's important to get all the information out there.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. I mean, Eddie, first of all, we moved down here to these studios, I don't know, like 10 years ago. And very shortly, these amazing photos appeared. So I feel like I've known you for 10 years, but I haven't met you. And I've always wanted to meet you because of these amazing photos that have adorned our studio. First of all, you guys have the best jobs ever. I mean, you
No
have
dispute.
to agree with that. Come on.
No dispute. Without question, we do.
The problem is when I'm working with John, that's the only problem.
That's the difficult part, right?
And he has the same problem with me.
It can't always be perfect. You know what I mean? You've got to have a little rub in there.
I want to start up clearing up some info for me. This album was or was not recorded at what is now known as Electric Ladyland on West 8th Street in Manhattan.
That is incorrect.
It is not. It was not recorded there.
Where's the big klaxon horn?
Well, you got the springs. You can play with those. Yeah.
This album was recorded. It started in England, actually, at Olympic Studios in London in late 1967, early 68.
I think it's July 67 to January 68.
No.
No?
It was really effectively December 67. January 68, and then they come to America.
Okay, all right. Yeah.
I moved to America. I came in to specifically continue working with Jimi. I was invited by Gary Kellgren, who had just built the record plant. That's the studio, 321 West 44th Street.
West 44th, yeah.
44th.
How you doing?
44th and 8th.
How you doing?
And that's where I landed to continue working with Jimi. And Gary had been in the studio with Jimi for like a month or so, and then I arrived in April, and we continued working. And some of the tracks for Electric Ladyland were actually cut at Olympic, like all along the Watchtower, for instance, when there's a story about that one.
Well, we want to hear that story. And Jimi played bass on that song, actually.
He certainly did, because Noel went to the pub and got drunk, I think.
That's shocking to hear. Shocking.
Shocking.
Getting back to Electric Lady, the studio itself, what is the background of that studio? Because I always heard or read, and over years I've heard similar variations of the story, that the Electric Ladyland studio was part of a record deal for Jimi with Warner Brothers Records. I mean...
No, it wasn't Electric Ladyland Studio. It's Electric Lady Studio.
Electric Lady, yes.
Yeah, but Jimi wanted to build a nightclub. Basically, it was the old Generation nightclub. And he was jamming there for about 6 months, and the club closed, and then it was for sale. And then Jimi and his manager bought it, and then it was sitting around, we're going to build a nightclub. And a friend of mine, John Storick, an architect friend of mine who was at Princeton University, just graduated, he was called in to design what was to be a nightclub, because he had done some fancy nightclub stuff here in New York. And then they called me in and said, "Hey, Eddie, do you want to go check this out? They want to put a little studio in the corner, like a little 8-track thing." And I walked down and I said, "You guys are crazy. Jimmy's spending $300,000 a year in 1969.
A lot of cash then, man.
And I said, "Let's build the best studio in the world for Jimmy." And they said, "Yeah, okay, that's a good idea."
Right, yeah.
And we built Electric Lady.
And it's and to this day an active studio. I've been I like one night I've gone to like a Gary Clark Jr. like listening party, and then the next night like Mumford and Sons is in there mastering their record or something.
It is still an existing studio. It's still one of the great studios in the world.
Yeah.
And it's been going almost 50 years now.
It's really cool walking in there. It's like a museum almost, you know. We're with Eddie Kramer, John McDermott. We're talking about Electric Ladyland, the 50th anniversary deluxe box set. And this album, lots of special guests on this, like Steve Winwood, Dave Mason, Jack Cassidy, Stephen Stills, I think, plays on this too. How did these guests appear at those sessions? Was it just very informal? Was it planned out? Did you get a phone call? Hey, you know, Jack Cassidy wants to stop by, and how does that work?
Well, imagine that you're on 44th and 8th, and 2 blocks away is this famous nightclub that Jimmy used to go jamming in called The Scene, Steve Paul's Scene, and that's on 46. Jimmy would be there from like 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. We're sitting in the studio. Everything's all set up. We're ready to go. All the mics are checked out. He comes strolling in at midnight, dragging behind him 20 people. So you can imagine him walking down 8th Avenue, stopping traffic. It was a big scene. Comes into the studio, dragging in, you know, Steve Winwood, Jack Cassidy, whoever. Couple of rehearsals, 1 take, 2 takes maybe, and there's Voodoo Child. Done. Finished. Thank you very much. Live from the floor. There it is.
Well, so now what time would you get to the studio?
We're there at 7.
You're there at 7, and so
And
you're
we didn't
hanging
finish
around.
till the next morning at 7.
Order some food. You're getting
Yeah.
hungry, and wow.
Smoke a few things.
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah. So, Eddie, you were in there for this album. You had already worked with him a lot at this point, and knowing that he was breaking so many barriers musically, culturally, et cetera, I'm just wondering, as an engineer, how do you tell Jimmy to take another take on a song? Hey, Jimmy, that was great, but, you know, why don't you try that again?
Jimmy, would you mind taking that again? Yeah, no problem, man. That's what it was like.
But he was notorious for taking like 20 takes, right? Like,
Well, that was part of the modus operandi for Jimmy. I mean, he could sometimes get a vocal in a couple of takes, but he was very much a perfectionist. Same thing with the guitar. Occasionally he'll get, you know, a master in 1 or 2, but most of the time, hey man, I got to do it again. Okay.
so for the crazy guitar, you know, freaks out there like myself, when Jimmy got a guitar to play, it was a right-handed guitar. What did he do? He turned it over. Did he restring it? How did he do it? John, maybe you know this.
Yeah, I mean, but you know what's interesting when you think about it, as someone who's interested in guitar, Jimmy was kind of an off-the-rack guy. He wasn't somebody who was really precise. He would go to Manny's and get like a white Strat or a black Strat and, you know, do exactly that. Just take a Strat, turn it over, restring it, and play.
Restring it
Yeah.
the way it, I mean.
Yeah, he wouldn't play it
wouldn't be
upside down like Otis Rush or Albert King.
Oh,
or
okay.
Plays like that. So he would restring it. But, you know, it's just, I just think he was somebody that was able to make things happen with it with a very simple setup. 68, it's 2, you know, modified pedals. And, you know, it's interesting when you think about Electric Ladyland. You know, Jimmy's playing through small Fender amps. It isn't like a Marshall cranked all the time. Some of the songs have that. But, you know, I think he and Eddie were always experimenting with tone and, you know, sound and miking and doing things that, you know, didn't necessarily mean like, hey, just turn everything up and blast.
Right. So at this point in Jimmy's career, had he really developed and matured as a songwriter and as sort of an arranger?
Yes, without question.
From, like, say, you know, Are You Experienced to that, right? I mean.
Yeah, Chaz Chandler helped him. You know, Chaz is really the hero of the Hendrix story in a lot of ways, in that he had the big picture vision. He understood Jimmy's talent, which was, you know, if you think about Chaz, he'd been the bass player in the Animals. They'd had like 10 top 40 hits. He understood the commercial pop market. So I think his skill as a producer was to continue to refine Jimmy, put some parameters on him to say, here's what you got to do. You got to write more. You got to focus more on crafting the song. Then I think once you get to Electric Ladyland, it's really the marriage of Chaz's influence, really great constructed pop songs like Crosstown Traffic, with things like Rainy Day Dream Away, which was Jimmy's
one of my
vision.
favorites. One of my favorites.
His idea to expand, involve different people, and do it in a different way. So Chaz's skill transferred to Jimmy, really helped him, because in the end, Electric Ladyland, as Jimmy himself described, was produced and directed by Jimmy. It couldn't have happened without the first two records and those singles that Chaz was a part of. Wouldn't you agree?
Absolutely. I mean, Chaz was the guy.
Cough.
It's early in the morning.
Yeah.
In the beginning, when Chaz and Jimmy lived together, Chaz was the one who'd sit up with him and said, "Come on, man, you got to write some songs."
Was that in New York or London?
London, 67,
yeah.
in the very beginning. And they shared a love for science fiction, comic books, all this kind of, that's where a lot of these influences came from. But it was Chaz saying, "Jimmy, you got to write. And because when he first started, he only was doing cover songs.
Right.
So.
Yeah, and I think the fact that Chaz was a musician, wasn't this kind of impresario or a manager guy. I think that connected with Jimmy, and Jimmy kind of understood what he was trying to impart to him, which was, listen, observe, see what's going on, and take your talent and channel it into better songs.
But at the time of Electric Ladyland, in the very beginning, Chaz was with Jimmy, and Jimmy wanted to have all these folks come on in. Hey, 10, 15 people.
Party time.
Party time. Well, it wasn't exactly party, but it was just hangers-on. And
jam.
And, well, Jimmy was doing what he wanted to do, but he wanted people around him. And Chaz said, then not so much. I don't want you playing for them. You got to play for what we're trying to do.
Let's get this record done.
That was a big conflict. So they parted ways, and then it was up to...
Sort of in the middle of all that, right?
Yeah, and then Jimmy...
Early on.
Yeah, very early on, in fact. There was quite a big contretemps, I believe they call it in France.
But of course. Big hits on this album. We were talking about it all along the Watchtower, Voodoo Child, Crosstown Traffic. Tell us a story about All Along the Watchtower.
That we started the track in London at Olympic, and there were a couple of very interesting moments during the cutting of that track. Dave Mason was playing 12-string acoustic guitar. Jimmy was playing 6, and Mitch Mitchell. Somehow or other, there wasn't a bass player at that moment because Jimmy wanted to play bass, and Noel got really pissed off and went to the pub and said, "See you later." But I remember very clearly that Jimmy was quite uptight with not only Mitch but Dave, because he couldn't get this chang 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 chang, and all that Dave had to do was playing brang brang brang, play the open chords and just strum across the strings.
How many tracks were you using? Was it 8?
4.
Oh, 4. Wow.
So once they got over that and they figured out, okay, this is how we're going to do it, we're about take 19, deep into it, right? And I'm hearing this, all of a sudden I hear this really horrendous piano, clang, 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 wrong chords, all out of time and stuff. And it's Brian Jones. He'd slipped into the studio and he's completely out of his mind. And he stumbled onto the piano right in the middle of a take. And I'm going, Jimmy's looking at me, get him out of here, get him out.
Wow.
So I walk in, hey, Brian, come on, come with me. Come and sit in front of the board. You hang out here for a minute. So he comes in and he sits in front of the console. We keep going. We're about take 23. We got the master. And I turn around. He's out. He's gone to sleep. He's out of it.
Wow.
And that's it.
And All Along the Watchtower.
That 4-track was brought to America and transferred to 12-track. And then Jimmy said, whoa, man, 8 more tracks. Woohoo.
Well, yeah, what can I add, right?
8 more tracks of guitar.
Wow. And that version, I mean, when I play it on the radio, I'm like, that might be the best cover version of any song ever. In fact, Bob Dylan, who wrote the song, I think at some point, he said something really positive about it. And I know at one point he actually played the arrangement that Jimmy did of that song.
Still does. He still plays that same arrangement.
With that dun, 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 like that in the beginning.
Well, the time turns around. That was the trick of it in the front, that Mitch couldn't get the time to flip around, and that's why Jimmy yelled at him.
Yeah. Eddie Kramer, John McDermott with us talking about Electric Ladyland, the 50th anniversary deluxe box set. Both of you talk about the amount of unreleased music, live or studio, that was out there, scattered around the world after Jimmy died. Because when you look at his relatively short career, you look at these 3 or 4 years, and it seems, and I know he was doing other things, but it really seems like he was either in the studio recording or he was doing a live show, flying somewhere, coming back in the studio. But talk about the amount of what was that process? Because you hear these stories of tapes in studios all over the place.
It's very true. I think what's interesting, you got to understand, in Jimmy's life, he had been denied the ability to record. He was this kind of itinerant sideman for Little Richard and the Isley Brothers. And, when the few times he would get to record, he would be told specifically what to do. He was not allowed to kind of put his own shine to anything. So I think by the time, Chandler gives him the gift of opportunity, he ran with it. And Jimmy was also an interesting guy in that he didn't have a Graceland, he didn't have 15 cars. He wasn't that kind of a guy. What did he put his money into? A recording studio. It's still here today. If he had never made another record after 1970, he'd still be running a studio and be successful. So that was his passion. And I think, he had a relationship with Eddie that was very supportive. He was a guy that used the studio to write songs, which, back then, you had guys in lab coats saying, okay, Jim, we got 15 more minutes. Let's go.
Wearing a tie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That changed with the record plant and then, of course, what you guys did at Electric Lady. So that had Jimmy lived, he would have sorted out all of these various tapes. We've worked hard to try to say, well, this is, what recordings he made with the Band of Gypsies or the later version of The Experience. I mean, we've done our best to try to say, here's where he might have gone. But, that's the tragedy of his death, is that he had built up this great reserve of material that would have been like the next double album that we would have been talking about, just as we would Electric Ladyland.
Right.
And those tapes had been stored in this series of closets at Electric Lady Studios. They were known, do not touch these closets. They were under lock and key. 1, 2, and 3 were all the tapes that had been collected.
Wow.
In 1969. Well, it's in 70 when we first started working together there.
And I think you produced the last 3 sort of, I don't want to call them reissues because they're
posthumously released. Yeah.
But that must have been quite an experience for you. I mean, there's 3 albums, I believe, right? Back 1, 2, 3. They were just with different titles.
Yeah, Cry of Love, which was the album that we were working on before Jimmy died, and we actually, thank goodness, we always talk about this, in that Jimmy and I actually mixed 4 songs at Electric Lady Studio. So I had an idea. I had a roadmap of what he was looking for and what the approach was. And thank goodness that occurred, because I don't think I would have been able to do it. After he died, it took me 2 or 3 months before I could actually walk in the studio and put the tapes on, because it was it was pretty emotional, as you can imagine.
But what's interesting is once Jimmy passed, then other people's agendas kind of took over. So it's like Cry of Love was the first record, but then Rainbow Bridge was this movie Jimmy had nothing to do with, that his manager had gotten involved in. So they took some of those songs, put them into that, and then things got really squirrely for a number of years thereafter. So, until the Hendrix family was able to take control in '95, that was the first chance where we had an opportunity to come in and start to solve all these old problems, bring in all these tapes, because invariably people were taking things, stealing things, litigation. There were all kinds of things that, we found so much of this great music that we've put out has come out as a result of trying to track all this stuff down.
In people's attics.
Yeah.
Right.
Basements.
Yes.
Hey, I got this tape. It says Jimi Hendrix.
Very true.
Okay.
Very true.
Call this guy.
We'll be right there.
So, Eddie, a surround sound remix of Electric Lady. What is the best way to experience that? Do you have to get like huge JBL studio monitors? I mean, ideally, that would be awesome.
The first thing you have to do is get several pairs of underwear. Because the experience is just, when I sat there with John and we put the first 1-inch 12-track tape, the original master, on the tape machine, and we're transferring it, I was going, oh my God, this is unbelievable. And you hear Jimmy talking to Chaz or to me or to the musicians. It just
That's
50 years that
that's
just have gone
freaky,
by, and it's
man.
just it was in a nanosecond. But you're listening to this stuff, and you go, "Damn, that's amazing." The idea here with this 5.1 is, all right, how on earth do I take that stereo mix that everybody's familiar with the wacky things that were going on? There was out of phase content that in stereo, all of a sudden the signal would jump right behind your head for a brief moment. And we were going, well, that's a mistake. And Jimmy said, yeah, no, let's leave it in, leave it in, leave it in. And we did that. And here we are 50 years later trying to recreate that. And we figured out how to do all the phasing in real time with multi-track tape machines and quarter-inch machines. And it's analog and digital combined. And Jimmy's guitar is spinning around the room. If he had been there, he would have said, yeah, man, more of that.
I want to hold up this photo again for Andrew and Deanna who are shooting this, because this is not the original album cover, right? This is a different photo. Tell me about this photo that we're looking at right now.
Well, this was shot by Linda Eastman, later became Linda McCartney, who was a friend of Jimmy and Mitch and Eddie. And they had an idea to shoot this in Central Park at the Alice in Wonderland statue. And what we did is we reproduced in the book Jimmy's handwritten letter to Warner Brothers saying, look, it's a very simple and effective design. Don't change it. Here are all the photos I want. He brought, there were photos that Eddie had taken, Linda had taken, Dave Siegel had taken, kind of intimate inside. He laid the whole thing out.
Who took the 15 naked women photo?
Oh, I'll get to that.
Okay, all right.
So, of course, Warner Brothers doesn't listen, put a different picture on the cover, and that's what happens. Now, in the UK, since Jimmy had kind of moved to America and had changed his base from London and New York, Track Records, his London company, felt, well, we need something to stir the pot. So they hired David Montgomery to shoot this amazing shot of these women holding up at Jimmy's album covers nude. Jimmy had no idea that it was happening, no idea that it was going to be the cover of the album. So they were flabbergasted when it came out. Can you imagine an artist today, hearing that, hey, that cover and he'd be like, what cover? What?
Yeah, it's the same cover in every country, right?
No. So that's what led to the classic shot of Jimmy biting the album cover that was in a lot of the papers then.
I got to tell you a story. Somebody had an import of that, and it was like, I have to have that.
Yeah.
I was a teenager,
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's interesting. I think it just shows you the difference. It was an ongoing transition, I think, between the artist having control over all aspects of his work, as opposed to the record company saying, yeah, we know what we're doing here. Go make the music. We'll take care of it. So I think that was in the middle of that transition. And for an album like this, it's funny. You see it in the documentary. Even the mastering, when it came back, the first mastering from Warner Brothers, it was Electric Landlady was the test, and they heard it and it sounded terrible.
Wow.
Yeah. So they missed
It's a good band name, though.
Yeah, they missed all that great stuff they were trying to do in the studio. They just tried to roll it all up and change it.
Jimmy was so pissed off about that. Oh, my God.
Wow.
All that work we put into it. Electric Landlady was,
Wow. Oops.
So there was a lot to fix. But in the end, the music shines through. But it's something like that would never happen today with any of the artists that are happening today. Never.
John, I want to ask you, are you working on a documentary on the Allman Brothers or
yes,
an anthology?
Yes, yeah. We've just started work with Bert Holman and the Allman Brothers on trying to pull together the early chapter in the band from their formation really through Eat a Peach. And we've found all kinds of amazing footage that hasn't been seen before, particularly of Dwayne playing with them. That'll be really exciting. So it's with Greg's passing and Dickie's had some health issues, so it's kind of been a slow process. But our goal is to to really get all the fans excited about it. Hopefully next year.
Have you guys seen Bohemian Rhapsody yet?
I'm going to see it on Sunday.
Okay.
I haven't yet. No.
Oh my God.
It's everybody who I've talked to says you've got to see it. It's absolutely amazing. And even the guys, Brian said it was cool.
It's I saw it in a theater with surround sound actually, and it was like my seat was vibrating. It was the music, and it wasn't that loud, but it was just
amazing.
It was fantastic. So try and see it in a place that has a good sound system if you can.
Cool.
Eddie, your guys in Kiss. You've worked with them extensively over the years. They just announced their final tour. Your thoughts?
What's the name of the band again?
But how long is the final tour? That's
It's
the question.
3 years,
Yeah,
I think. I swear to God, I think it's like 3 years.
All I can say is good luck, guy. That's wonderful. I'm glad you're out there. Gesang gesund, Gene Simmons. I could speak some Yiddish to you, but I'll stop today.
And when people ask you, Eddie, about your work with Led Zeppelin, is there one story that comes to mind immediately?
Boy.
An anecdote?
Whoa. Yeah. Recordings Led Zeppelin at Mick Jagger's house called Stargroves in England. And there was a song called Black Country Woman. And the boys decided that they wanted to record the acoustic guitar basic track outside on the lawn. We had the Stones mobile truck parked outside. And as Robert's doing the vocal for this bloody great big 4-engine airplane passes right over here, and you hear this airplane engines going over, and I hit the talkback button. I said, "Oi, Robert, what about this airplane?" He says, "Nah, leave it." And that's actually on the CD, and that's when they cut that right in. So
what album is that? Is that
that's Physical Graffiti.
Physical Graffiti?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Fantastic. I want to ask you the same about the Beatles. I think you engineered or worked on All You Need Is Love, right? Is that it? Or
yeah, das ist so.
So,
Yes.
I mean, we've seen the video of them in this place. It was like an international broadcast or whatever. But tell me about working with those guys on All You Need Is Love.
Well, they booked Olympic Studios because they couldn't get into EMI. And I was the lucky one who was the engineer to work with them. They come in, and John sits right next. Hello, John. John sat next to me, and he's got this acoustic guitar. He says, "Oh, come on, lads, we got to do this song for TV." And he goes, "All you need is love." And he starts strumming the guitar, and I'm thinking, bloody hell, how am I going to get that vocal through the headphones? Because the boys all started to walk out into the studio. McCartney picks up a string bass. So George Martin goes over to the harpsichord, and then he's still playing. So I figured out how to patch that talkback mic into the headphones, and he sat right next to me while the song was going, and we roll one reel of tape, which is about half an hour. Boom, into record. Here we go. And you go, 2, 3, all you need is... Gets to the end of the song, the first take. You ready? 2, 3. And they did this about 20 times. Get to the end of the roll of tape, and he says, "Right, coming in, let's have a listen." So we wind back 2 from the end, play it back. "Yeah, that's great. See you later. Bye." And they took that half-inch tape to EMI, and that's what they used to overdub to, and then they played that back live through the Telstar.
For the television broadcast, right?
Yeah, that's the story.
Unbelievable. Eddie Kramer, John McDermott. Of course, we're talking about Electric Ladyland, the 50th anniversary deluxe box set. You can get all the info on Eddie Kramer at eddie-kramer.com. John, where do we find your digital footprint?
You can go to learn more about the record. Go to jimmyhendrix.com, and all the good news is up there.
And legacyrecordings.com as well.
Of course.
Guys, a real pleasure and honor to have you both in here. Again, you have the best jobs ever. If you ever like to trade places, please let me know. But everyone go out and get Electric Ladyland, the 50th anniversary box set. It's coming out November 9th. Guys, thank you so much.
Thanks for having us. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, man.